Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Parker Bullen webinar on powers of attorney. I hope you're all well this afternoon. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to join us. It's great to see so many of you listening in. My name is Caton and I'm your host for this short webinar. My job really is just to push all the right buttons, ask any questions, and generally keep things on track. This is an informal chatty style webinar, so please do get involved. Please use the Q&A button, which is on your sort of screens. You should have one there, which you can use to type in any questions and submit them through to us. And we will try and cover as many as we can, either during or at the end of the presentation. So before I hand over to today's presenters, just a couple of housekeeping points. We are recording this webinar, and the good thing about that is that a link to it will be shared with you afterwards. So if you wanted to watch it back and re-listen to it, then you will be able to do so. And really the purpose of this webinar is for us to just share with you some useful information, practical tips and guidance on the topic of powers of attorney. Any advice that we give is generic and shouldn't be relied upon unless you have spoken to us separately and we provided you with advice that is pertinent to your individual circumstances. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to today's webinar presenters. We've got Bethan Creasy and Hannah Goodeve, who are both solicitors in our wills, probate and estates team. So over to you, Bethan and Hannah.
Thank you, Caton. So I'm Bethan and my colleague Hannah will be speaking later on. And as Caton said, we are both solicitors in the private client department here at Parker Bullen. And today we're going to present to you a webinar on powers of attorney. So wouldn't it be useful to understand, I'll go to the next slide. So wouldn't it be useful to understand the various types of power of attorney available to you and your peers and how they can assist everyday tasks, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the term power of attorney is used quite a lot, and we have lasting powers of attorney, we have powers of attorney, general powers of attorney, enduring powers of attorney, and there are just so many terms thrown around by friends and family that it's really difficult to know which one applies to you and your circumstances. So, you might ask yourself, do I have one? And if I do, how do I know which one I have? Have I been appointed as someone's attorney? And if I have, which type of power of attorney have I been appointed under? And does it make a difference what type of power of attorney I've been appointed under? And do I personally need one myself? So you may have seen in the press recently that Good Morning Britain's Kate Garraway has been going through a very difficult time ever since her husband fell ill to COVID. So apart from the obvious difficulties that their family is facing with, their husband and their father suffering with coronavirus, Kate has also struggled with the financial side of things. So she's recently opened up about the issues she's faced since her husband had been taken ill, because his name was on all the bills, it was on their insurance policies, and his car was in their name, meaning that Kate hasn't been able to deal with a lot of their finances as easily as she may have liked because she didn't have a power of attorney in place. So, to explain, a power of attorney is an umbrella term, and we use that to describe legal documents which allow you to give an individual or individuals the authority to make certain decisions on your behalf. So these individuals are called attorneys, and they can be appointed under one of three different types of power of attorney. So we've got the general power of attorney, the enduring power of attorney, and or the lasting power of attorney. So each power of attorney is slightly different, and not all of them can be put in place today. So during this webinar, we will explain each one in turn, and we will discuss the key things to think about when putting a power of attorney in place and explain what the attorney's responsibilities are. So you may be asking, well, what are the different types of power of attorney, and what's the difference between them all? So firstly, we've got a general power of attorney. Now this is a fairly straightforward document, and it allows you to give somebody the authority to act on your behalf in a wide range of circumstances. So as the name suggests, the authority given can be as general as you like, although most general powers of attorney will limit types of decisions that are covered and/or how long the authority is to last. So for example, you may put a general power in place which states that an individual can make decisions on your behalf in relation to a specific property purchase whilst you're working abroad. So this power may include the property address to ensure that the general power could not be used in the future for other properties that you may purchase. A general power can be revoked or cancelled at any time by you. However, unlike the other powers of attorney that we shall discuss, the authority granted under a general power of attorney ends if or when you lose mental capacity. Okay, so moving on to enduring powers of attorney. So these allow you to give chosen individuals the authority to make decisions on your behalf, but such decisions are limited to those relating to your property and financial affairs. So the range of decisions that can be authorised under an enduring power of attorney are much more limited compared to those of a general power of attorney. Nevertheless, the key difference between a general power and an enduring power is that your attorneys can act on your behalf when you have lost mental capacity as well as when you retain it. So with a general power, that can't be used once you've lost mental capacity. However, with an enduring power, that can be used whilst you have mental capacity and once you've lost it. Okay, so moving forward, so the final type of power of attorney we're going to discuss is the lasting powers of attorney. So these replaced enduring powers of attorney in 2007. So there are two different types. We've got the property and financial affairs, and we've got the health and welfare. So you'll see those on the screen there. So lasting power of attorney for your property and financial affairs is very similar to the enduring power of attorney. So as with the enduring power of attorney, this power allows your attorneys to deal with your bank accounts, pay your bills, you can manage investments and pensions and buy or sell your home. And it can be used by your attorneys before you've lost capacity, but only with your permission. And it can also be used once you've lost mental capacity. So the financial LPA can be useful even whilst you still have capacity. So one example is if you were to break your arm and you couldn't sign a document, if you had a power of attorney in place, then your attorney would be able to sign on your behalf without any hiccups. Lasting powers of attorney are also useful for whatever stage of life you're at. And, you know, whether you're 18 or 81, they can assist you. For example, if you're on holiday and you can't get back to authorise something in relation to your property or your financial affairs. Or even if, for example, later on in life, you've lost your sight, you can have an attorney deal with things on your behalf. Or even if you're in receipt of medical treatment, which means that you temporarily can't deal with your finances, having a power of attorney in place would help you with that. So the second type of lasting power of attorney deals with your health and welfare. And this authorises your attorneys to make decisions on your behalf in relation to your healthcare and your well-being. So your attorneys can do things such as determine your course of treatment, or whether you should continue to live at home or move into a care home, or stay at home and have a living carer. And it can even, attorneys can make decisions on what you should eat, what you should drink, and what you should wear. So I must stress that this power of attorney for your health and welfare, this can only be used once you've lost mental capacity, which makes sense because, you don't want someone making decisions on your behalf whilst you can and you're still able to make those decisions. So this power of attorney for your health and welfare, it can also extend to decisions surrounding treatment that will continue your life, such as, for example, a heart bypass or even cancer treatment. So an LPA is only effective if it is registered. So if you were to instruct us to prepare your lasting powers of attorney, then once they're completed, we will register them for you on your behalf with the Office of the Public Guardian. So another thing that you might like to consider are business LPAs. So if you run a business or if you are a partner in a partnership agreement, you may wish to consider this option, as it's a type of financial power of attorney that deals with your interest in a business and its assets rather than your personal financial matters. So, for example, important decisions may need to be made if the business owner was abroad on holiday and an urgent business decision needs to be made and they weren't contactable for whatever reason, or if the business owner was involved in an accident or became incapacitated. So, in order to understand if a business LPA is right for you, you must take into consideration the type of business you have. So, if you are a director, a partner, or a sole trader, you will inevitably have spent a vast amount of time, money, and effort investing in your business. So, if you don't have the capacity to make decisions, it's vital that you have had your say in who you want to appoint to take over and continue to make those decisions on your behalf. And if a business LPA isn't made and the owner of the said business was to become incapacitated, others are able to make an application to the Court of Protection in order to appoint an individual to act on your behalf. But this is expensive, it's time consuming, and sometimes the court may not appoint someone you would have chosen, and this in turn would put your business at risk. So we say that, business LPAs are especially important in light of the current climate. So, for example, if you or one of your business partners is taken ill to coronavirus, for example, then you will want to make sure that your business can continue to operate smoothly in your absence. So, in having a business LPA in place, you're appointing an individual to make decisions on your behalf in relation to your business interests or assets in the event that you can't. So I'm going to hand over to Hannah now, who's going to go through what should be considered when putting power of attorney in place and the attorney's responsibilities.
Thank you, Bethan. So as Bethan's discussed, we've talked about what types of power of attorney are in place, but also we've talked about sort of what the differences are between them. So the next thing to consider are, what are the key things to think about when putting a power of attorney in place? Well, the key thing really is to think about who you'd want to act for you as your attorney, and also, how many do you appoint? Powers of attorney are essentially based on trust, and so it's really important that you choose people who are absolutely trustworthy, who are going to be capable of making decisions on your behalf, and who understand your wishes, values, and beliefs. Your attorneys may therefore be your friends, your family members, or you can also appoint professional attorneys too, such as a solicitor or an accountant, for example. You can choose to appoint one attorney, although we generally recommend that you appoint more than one, just in case one attorney is unable to assist you at any time. An example of this is that it's often common for people who are married to appoint their spouse as their sole attorney and sometimes their only attorney. However, if their spouse passes away or loses mental capacity, or even if they get a divorce, this attorney will no longer be able to act for them, and they'll have nobody who will be able to step in their place and act for them on their behalf instead. Therefore, if there's often people that you would think that you would definitely want to act for you, should your spouse be unable to assist you, then we always recommend that you appoint them as a joint attorney or as a replacement attorney at the same time as appointing your spouse, just so that you're covered for all eventualities. This will then avoid any sort of expense later on should you need to put a new lasting power of attorney in place, but also putting a new lasting power of attorney in place requires you to have mental capacity. And as we can tell, things come up which we can't foresee, and therefore it's often safer just to appoint them in the first instance. If you are appointing more than one attorney, though, it is important that you consider who works well together. So what are an attorney's responsibilities? So an attorney's responsibilities are essentially very similar to those which you would expect of anybody who is acting for you. So all attorneys are under a duty of care when making decisions on your behalf. They must also act with honesty and integrity and must not take advantage of your position. The Mental Capacity Act 2005 and the Mental Capacity Act 2005 Code of Practice sets out the key duties of an attorney and the key principles that attorneys must follow when making decisions on your behalf. The Act does only really refer to lasting powers of attorney, enduring powers of attorney, but these key duties and principles apply to any powers of attorney, including general too. The fundamental responsibility of any attorney is that they must act in your best interests when making a decision on your behalf. As a result, attorneys must have your personal, political, cultural, moral, and religious views and values at the forefront of their mind when making decisions on your behalf. In doing so, they must make sure that their own interests, values, and beliefs do not cloud their judgment. They must also take into account all of the relevant circumstances and not just the ones that they consider to be important. An attorney must also, one, assume that you have mental capacity to make decisions for yourself, unless it can be established that you're unable to do so. Generally, attorneys will seek medical opinions if they're unsure, and it's prudent that they do so. Two, do everything they can to help you make your own decision before making it for you. For example, if you lost your voice, and then an attorney may use visual aids to assist you to make your decision by yourself. Three, not assume that you cannot make a decision for yourself because your attorneys believe it is unwise or they don't agree with it. An example I often use is that if you are a professional, you've always kept your hair a natural colour, and suddenly you decide to colour it purple, and your attorneys sort of look at you strangely, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've lost capacity, even if your attorneys think that it's out of character or unwise. And fourthly, they should consider all the options available to you and choose an option which is the least restrictive to your rights and freedoms. We are often asked what happens if an attorney does not follow the key principles set out by law, in particular if it appears that they're not acting in your best interests. And one of our colleagues, Gareth Horner, recently replied to a reader in the Daily Mail who believes that their brother has persuaded their father to give them the power of attorney so that he can sell their father's shares for gold. If anybody has any concerns that an attorney is misusing their authority under a power of attorney, then they should consult the Office of the Public Guardian. The Office of the Public Guardian is a government body which oversees lasting powers of attorneys and enduring powers of attorney in particular. They investigate reports of misuse and will take the appropriate action. Such action can include making recommendations to an attorney, but they can also refer matters to other agencies and to the court. The court then has the power to cancel power of attorney completely or to remove an attorney if you no longer have the mental capacity to do so yourself and wrongdoing is proven. You can also bring legal action yourself, or if you don't have the mental capacity and there is another attorney appointed too, your other attorney can also bring the legal action on your behalf. Such claims can include undue influence or breach of trust or fiduciary duties. However, we would recommend seeking legal advice before sort of pursuing any of those legal claims. So what does this all boil down to? Why are powers of attorney important, and am I old enough to put one in place? Well, powers of attorney are often associated with the older population, but anybody who is over 18 and has mental capacity can draw up a power of attorney. As we have discussed, they have everyday useful applications. They essentially allow people that you trust to make decisions for you when you're unable to do so yourself. This could be simply because you're on holiday and you can't sign something on your own behalf. Of all the powers of attorneys put in place, a lasting power of attorney is crucial and essential practical life admin. In fact, some people, including Martin Lewis, have explained that a lasting powers of attorney can essentially be more important than a will. Whilst we still think wills are very important, we would not persuade you not to put one in place. Lasting powers of attorney should be seen with equal weight, if not maybe even greater. We recently had an inquiry about somebody who was in their 20s and they'd just been involved in a car crash. Now, this 20-year-old had a property and also bank accounts of their own, and their family were trying to help them with paying the bills and the mortgage, but he didn't have any lasting power of attorney in place, and as such, the family were really struggling to be able to help him. Unfortunately, the person is okay now, but during that time when it was quite distressing, it would have been really helpful for the family just to have been able to have the legal authority to help him. If you were to lose mental capacity without a lasting power of attorney in place, your family would have to apply to the Court of Protection to appoint a deputy on your behalf. This comes at a significant cost and can take a considerable amount of time to complete. It's also generally at a time which is very distressing. We therefore recommend anybody at any age putting a lasting power of attorney in place. So to summarise then, there are three powers of attorney, There is a general power of attorney, lasting powers of attorney, and also enduring powers of attorney. And which one that you have really depends on your circumstances. But as we said, enduring powers of attorney can no longer be put in place. Powers of attorney have everyday useful applications for all generations. It doesn't matter what your age, they are incredibly important. Key thing to consider when putting any sort of power of attorney in place, is that you need to consider who you should appoint as attorney, or who's most suited to be appointed as an attorney, and how many attorneys you want to appoint. Each attorney is under key duties and principles and responsibilities covered by law, and essentially the main one is that they must act in your best interests. If you're over 18 and have mental capacity, you should seriously consider drawing up a power of attorney. If this pandemic has proven anything, it's that we can't foresee what the future holds, and therefore we can, however, put steps in place to make sure that if something awful happened, we've got the right people there that we trust to help us. That really brings everything I wanted to say to an end. Is there anything else, Bethan, that you can think of that we haven't covered?
No, I think we've done a pretty good job there.
Great. I guess
Excellent.
it's really, Katie, if any questions, I guess.
Yes, indeed. So thank you, Bethan and Hannah, for that fantastic and informative presentation. Lots of information there for everyone to absorb, I think. If anybody does have any questions, please do send them through now. I have got one question that's come in already from Ashley, who asks, how long does it take to prepare and register an LPA?
Yeah. Did you want me to take this, Bethan, or did you want to?
Yeah, you go for it.
Okay. So it can take some months to actually get a lasting power of attorney in place, not necessarily to draw it up, but to ensure that everybody who you're appointing as attorney and yourself signs it correctly. Once everybody has signed it and it's been sent off to be registered, it can take 2 months generally for it to come back. So I generally recommend that you probably need to allow about 3 to 4 months. So it's not a quick process. General powers of attorney are completely different because they don't need to be registered, but a lasting power of attorney, it's not a very quick document to put in place. So it's therefore better to sort of plan ahead and get that document signed up as soon as possible.
Excellent. Thank you, Hannah. We've got another question here from Linda. Hello, Linda. And she asks, do my attorneys have to be the same people that I have appointed as the executors of my will? And do I have to have the same attorneys for both LPAs?
Okay, I'll take this one. So essentially, your executors act in your will, and they're appointed by your will. So they will only act once you've passed away. Okay, so then with your attorneys that you appoint under your lasting power of attorney, these will act for you throughout your lifetime. So they don't have to be the same person or people at all. They can be different. And, you know, of course, you may trust someone to deal with your affairs differently whilst you're alive compared to once you've passed away. So they don't have to be the same at all. And then in terms of the second question, what was that again, Katie?
Yeah, so that's, do I have to have the same attorneys for both LPAs?
Yeah, that's right. So you don't have to have the same attorneys. So again, some people like to appoint someone to deal with their finances and then a different person to deal with their health and welfare. So they're completely separate and you don't have to appoint the same people for either. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. And Linda, I understand that your question that you submitted has some context to it, and we'd be happy to answer a question that's more tailored to your circumstances separately from this webinar. Another question that has come through from Vaughan, and Vaughan asks, assuming someone has an LPA and is now in a care home, what decisions can you make on their behalf? And could this direct what visiting rights they would like, and how would this be considered if the home had more restrictive views?
Oh, that's a very good question. See, if this is in relation to the pandemic, the visiting rules are they are kind of different at the moment because of it being covered by government guidance. So a sort of a lasting power of attorney for health and welfare, it allows your attorneys to make decisions that you would have had the ability to make yourself. So it can sort of, you can decide sort of where somebody lives, such as in a care home, and also covers decisions like what they're eating, what they're wearing. In terms of visiting rights and such, really that is, I think, that is down to the care home. But it's a difficult one. I think we'd have to get back in a bit more detail, but I think if it's to do with COVID, then the government guidance at the moment will sort of, I guess, will sort of fundamentally will will sort of have a big key role in that. I don't know if that answers really the question, actually.
I think that's right. Vaughan, if we haven't answered your question there, then please do just get in touch afterwards, and we'll try and provide you a bit more of a detailed answer. Thank you for that. We have got another question here from Joe, and Joe asks, you've mentioned that appointing persons who are trustworthy to act as your attorneys is important, but what happens if I fall out with one of them?
Bethan, do you want me to do this, or do you want to do it? It's up to you.
Go for it.
So if you fall out with somebody, you are able to revoke or cancel a lasting power of attorney and put a new one in place. The key thing is that you have the mental capacity to do so. So we spoke about having more than one attorney because there are circumstances which we can't foresee, which may mean that an attorney may not be able to act for you, but you've lost capacity to be able to put one in place. If you've fallen out with them, then obviously you may want to consider putting a new one in place by cancelling an old one and putting a brand new one in place. But our lasting powers of attorney are very different to wills. You can't just amend them. You do have to cancel them completely and put new ones in place.
Thank you. And yes, we've got another question coming through. This is from Keith, and hello Keith. And Keith asks, I'm concerned that my wife and I took out enduring powers of attorney, but as you said, there are now lasting powers of attorney available. Do I need to replace my enduring power of attorney?
That's a really good question, actually. So when the new lasting powers of attorney came into place, they weren't designed to replace any existing enduring powers of attorney. So to answer your question simply, no, you don't have to take out a lasting power of attorney for your property and finances. However, you may, if you're considering taking out a lasting power of attorney for your health and welfare, you may consider that actually it's quite a good idea to take out a lasting power for my property and finances as well. And that's just because I think the key difference there being is that lasting powers of attorney are registered straight away, so they can be used whilst you have capacity, and then it's a seamless transition. If you ever do lose capacity, it's a seamless transition. You don't have to do any paperwork at the point if you were to lose capacity. So it's something to consider. It may be, practically speaking, easier to have both LPAs. However, you don't necessarily need to replace your enduring power of attorney with the lasting power of attorney. It's still effective. You got anything to add there, Hannah? Or
no, that was all good for me.
Excellent, thank you, Bethan. And we've got one final question, I think. This has come through from Sheila. Hello, Sheila. And Sheila's asked this question in relation to business LPAs that you've mentioned during the webinar. She asks, practically speaking, can you have more than one power of attorney in place at a given time?
yeah, you go for that, Hannah, that's fine.
Yes, you can have more than one lasting power of attorney in place. You've got to be very careful with having more than one in place, though, because it can cause confusion when you come to things like banks often struggle with lasting powers of attorney anyway. So to have two in place, which appoint different people, can cause confusion, and then they won't release, give authority to anyone to act on your behalf. With business lasting powers of attorney, say if you had a business power of attorney and a sort of personal one, then that should be absolutely fine. But I would just make sure you get some advice before putting your sort of two in place, and just make sure that the person who you're speaking to is aware that you've already got one in place, so they can just check and make sure it's not going to cause any problems for your attorneys later on.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Bethan and Hannah. That was fantastic. And thank you very much for everyone who's joined us this afternoon. Anybody who's asked any questions, if we haven't quite given you the answer you're looking for, then please do get in touch. Or indeed, if you or anyone you know would like any advice in relation to this topic, please do get in touch as well. Details of Bethan and Hannah's contact details are on screen there. Just a reminder to everyone here, you will receive a link to this recorded webinar after this webinar. Finally, if you did find today's webinar very useful, then please do join us at another one. Details of our future webinars will be available very soon, so please do look out for those. Unless anyone else has any further questions, thank you very much for joining this afternoon, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.